Alright, I know what you're thinking, but Angel, you're not really the most credible person to be talking about hair. Well, damn, give me a chance. So today I'm gonna be talking about drawing hair, and the reason why I named this video Learning How to Draw Hair is because as with all the other tutorials that I do, it's a process. My favorite type of tutorials on YouTube are people that are like 3 easy ways to draw hair. Do this line and then do that line, and then you end up with the weekend's hair. And my favorite thing is when people ask me, Angel, can you teach me how to draw curly hair and ponytails? Yes, because you're already so good at drawing basic hair. So I have this philosophy that if you understand the forms and planes of hair, you're gonna be able to draw any type of hair. It's kind of like faces. First you learn all of the structure and planes, and then you get to all of the same looking portraits of 13-year-olds with big eyes. And let's be honest, what is an Angel's tutorial without structure and planes? So I'm gonna talk about hair principles, I'm gonna show you different types of hair, and then I'm gonna show you my process of drawing it. Now the best place to start with learning how to draw hair is the same as learning how to draw anything else, and that's fuckboys. Now fuckboys are the perfect subject to study because they have this great balance of both a male and a female face. They have this flawless wavy hair, and sometimes they even have feather earrings. And I believe that you should always start with the easiest thing to understand. Like, why would you go and try to draw ponytails when your hair looks like tumbleweed? And the easiest type of hair to understand is wavy mid-length fuckboy hair. That's because straight hair doesn't have enough planes and curly hair has too many planes. If it's too short, it's hard to build form. If it's too long, it's hard to see the individual strands. I told you that the fuckboys are balanced. Now the most important thing to remember is to not focus on copying the reference. I don't know where this shit started, probably all these Instagram artists who do hyper realistic drawings. But people think they need to draw every single little fucking hair. Why? Instead, you need to focus on analyzing and breaking down the strands of hair. Now, what is a strand of hair? A good question. A strand of hair is what falls off when you accidentally press too hard while cutting your own hair in quarantine. Like, can't relate. It's a group of different hairs that come together to form an allegiance. That's the worst explanation I've ever heard. So when I'm drawing hair, I'm always drawing different blocks made up of strands of hair, not some individual little hair, because again, a tumbleweed. And right here I have a breakdown of different type of strands, and it might be a good idea to first draw only individual strands rather than the whole thing, because we both know it's not gonna end up looking good. So in reality, when I'm drawing hair, all I'm thinking about are these strands of hair and how I can stack them upon each other to create the illusion of hair. I'm not just trying to copy the reference. Now that sounds great, and as soon as I tell it to people, their hair gets better. But something very important to remember is that you need to repeat the strand of hair without it looking boring. Because people hear strands of hair and they're like, oh fuck yeah, and they just start repeating the same shape over and over again, and their character ends up with hair plugs. And not the good type. That's why it's so important to analyze the strand of hair and see how you can make it look more interesting. For example, in this drawing, even though I have a similar shape repeating itself, sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter, and I make sure to change the direction of the strand. So when you're looking at the reference, you analyze the strands of hair and you look at their direction and length. In the beginning, you might even do some tracing on top of the reference just to imagine where the strands are gonna be. Then we have think about planes and invent basic shapes. So when you're drawing the strand of hair, it's really important to draw it as a 3D object. So you don't think about 2D shapes like triangles and squares, but you think about 3D objects like cubes and pyramids and other shit that you learn in 5th grade. And it's really important to learn how to draw things into basic shapes. So don't try to draw every single little hair trying to prove how realistic you are, but just try to simplify it. And when I'm drawing these 3D shapes, I make sure to show a separation of where the plane is changing. This is the same way with the planes of the head. You have a clear separation of where one plane ends and another one starts. So for example, in here, notice how this strand has a bottom plane, then a top plane, and then this side plane over here. I swear, people never draw any type of plane separation. They just draw these flat shapes, and then they're like, oh, why does my hair look so flat? The difference is that when I'm drawing the hair, I don't draw the plane separation with a flat line like the face, but I draw this zigzag line. That's because the strand of hair is made up of all these individual little hairs, and if you just draw a straight line like this, you're gonna lose the illusion of hair, and it's gonna start looking like you have a Rubik's Cube on your head. Then we have think about the deeper shadows and separations. So the thing that really makes hair look like hair is these deeper shadow separations that occur between different strands. If you look at this drawing here, that's what makes the hair look so juicy, is these deep shadow separations right here. But remember, you're still a fucking simp and you don't deserve to draw women. So when you're drawing the strand, you think not only about the planes, but you also think about the deeper separation that's gonna happen between the planes. If you look at this hair, you can see how this is one plane, this is another, and then there's the zigzag separating top from bottom, and then in the middle there's a deeper shadow. And with a deep shadow, I'll usually make the line thicker so that when I'm shading, I'll know it's a shadow and it also looks sexy. Then we have big forms to small, use the reference as inspiration. As I told you before, we're not trying to just copy the reference, but rather we use it as an inspiration to build 3D forms and analyze it. That's why I don't understand the whole concept of drawing from imagination. Like, why would you fantasize about the forms when you have all of the juiciness right there? That's like you fantasizing about people fucking when you have Pornhub right next to you. It's just not practical. So I'm using the reference to help me design these sexy 3D shapes, but I'm always starting from big to small. So initially, all I have is the basic outline of where the strands are gonna be, and then I break down all of the planes and the separation. But I've seen a lot of people on my Patreon get so caught up in the idea of planes, they just start drawing these pyramids on people's heads. It still needs to look like fucking hair. Use S-curves for better design, exaggerate forms. So I don't know if you're familiar, but straight lines are not very sexy unless they're made out of cocaine. Instead, when designing shapes, it's much better to use S-curves. So in all these strands, especially if it's wavy hair, you can kind of see how the lines are flowing. Of course, that doesn't mean you need to draw spaghetti hair and make everything wobbly. You still need straight lines to bring structure into your hair. But I just see so many people draw hair as if it's made out of straws. I know this is probably the most generic advice ever, but just try to make it look sexy. I don't know if beginners even know what sexy means. Just look at me. So try to exaggerate the form and make it look interesting. Of course, don't pull shit out of your ass. You still need to look at the reference, just make it better. Like, look at this strand of hair over here. Why does it look like it got drunk on cheap vodka? Instead, I try to keep the planes in the direction, I just exaggerate the form of the strand. And finally, we have the flow of hair and the cake effect. What the cake effect is a design principle. So if you look at a cake, not those cheap ones that you buy at 2 a.m. when you're desperate, but like a real wedding cake. It's stacked with layers upon each other, each one getting respectively smaller, and that's sexy because cakes are sexy. So you can use that principle when drawing hair. Like, for example, if you look at this one, the first one is the biggest and then it gets smaller and smaller. Now that doesn't mean that all of your hair needs to have the cake effect, because that's gonna look weird. It just means that you need to be conscious when you're designing the hair. I love how people never think about the actual design and structure of hair, and they're just like, I'm just gonna fix it in the shading part, and then the shading part is literally just throwing paint, and they're like, Angel, I can't draw hair. Well, bitch. Another really important thing is the flow of hair. So as we talked about, hair is not just some straight lines coming out of your head like hair plugs. It has its own flow, and I like to imagine how it's alive and it's talking to me, and I'm definitely not delusional. So for example, if you look at this hair, you can kind of see how it follows this direction almost like a river. It's not just the same curve repeating over and over again, but there's an actual flow. And a great exercise is to do some tracing on top of the reference to find this flow of the hair and see how it actually goes around the head, and that helps with the illusion of a 3D form. It's not just some straight lines like this. Now let's look at the process that I use to draw hair. And by the way, I was only focused on drawing the hair and not the face, so I better not hear any comments, yo, what is up with that face? So I start out with laying in the head, and it's really important to imagine where the skull is gonna be. I love when people draw portraits and they draw the head ending where the hair is supposed to be, and everybody has these watermelon heads. So try to imagine where the skull is gonna be in the reference and draw it the same way in your sketch. That way the hair is really gonna look like it's sitting on top of the head and it's not just taped on top of your forehead. After I lay in the head, I draw the basic shape of the hair, but it's also not just an outline, it's just blocks of hair connecting to each other. Then I separate the big blocks into smaller planes, and this is really where you start thinking about designing the hair. So you look at the reference to see where those planes are gonna be, but you also think about the flow of hair, S-curves, and the cake effect. And it should start looking like hair in this step. Like, don't think that you need a lot of details in order to make it look good. Like, you just need simplicity and basic understanding of 3D forms, which you probably don't have. Once I have these smaller shapes, I add the separation of the planes themselves with the zigzag lines. So here I'm just turning a 2D shape into an actual 3D object, and I'm thinking about how can I add planes, like a side plane, a top plane, a bottom plane. Then I draw the deeper shadow separations, and you can see how I don't really change much from the step before. It's just further breakdown of the planes that I already have. And in here I really think about line weight and how I can add more thickness to the lines, because as a wise man once said, the thicker the better. I was that wise man. And finally, I just add some smaller pieces to further create the illusion of hair. It's really important though to not just add some single lines coming out of the hair, making it look like an overused broom. Rather draw triangular shapes with S-curves like that and really make sure that you're following the flow of the hair. Again, not hair plugs, but actual flow. You can also download from the description a free PDF that covers everything I talked about in this tutorial, because we both know you're not gonna remember it tomorrow. And again, this is not some pretty tutorial on how to draw some cute hair or some shit like that. Like, your lines don't need to be perfect. It's just important to start seeing things in 3D and start drawing planes. This is just a way to start learning how to draw hair. But if you don't do any exercises, you're not gonna understand shit. If you wanna watch the full 1-hour video with me drawing all these 5 different examples in real time, you can check out my Patreon. I also have a mini course that covers all the different exercises for learning how to draw portraits, so check it out, patreon.com/angelganef. I'll be doing more hair tutorials in the future, how to shade it, how to draw ponytails, all that stupid shit, but it doesn't make sense unless you understand all the structure first. So check out the description, go do your exercises, and please stop throwing spaghetti on the floor, bitch.